Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I bow to the Infinite One. I bow to Him in you. May you feel His joy in your heart. I bow to my Guru, through whom I have found these great teachings of India. I am not an American. I am a disciple of a great Indian Guru. I have lived in many countries, but in no country have I felt so much at home as in India, because this is where my heart sings. I would like to read to you. You know, there's an interesting thing before I begin the reading. There has been a lot of publicity in modern times about the only difference between men and women, apart from physical, is that the men are trained to be men and the girls are trained to be women. And I read a letter to the editor in our local paper in Nevada City from a mother who said that she had tried her best to train her son and her daughter exactly the same. But finally she just had to admit the little girl, when she saw dresses and dolls, she loved them. And the boy, when he first heard a motorcycle, was all excited. There is a difference. It's certainly hormonal. It's not basic. You can be a man in one lifetime. You can be a woman in the other. But to try to say they're exactly the same is to forget that everything in this universe is dual. God, in order to create the universe, had to sort of send the storm of Maya out over the surface of his ocean and create waves. And wherever there's a wave that rises, there has to be a corresponding trough. There has to be that difference, or Maya would cease to exist. You have to try to get away from that difference, and when you see great saints, you see that they have. And as a result, you can never see clearly whether they're male or female, because they have both qualities. One time my guru was on a train in America, and I think he was dressed in his geru cloth, and the porter walked up and down. He was a black man, and he walked up and down looking like this, and looking at him like that. Finally he said, "Is you a man or is you a woman?" And Master with a deep voice said, "What do you think?" The reality, however, I used to see Anandamayi Ma walking, and she walked almost like a general. There's a equality there. But until then, there is that difference. And in Master's work, he drew more women than men, because the men, it was harder for the men. You know, in America, men especially are trained to be very sort of self-sufficient, and I could never have imagined calling anybody my teacher. I used to look at my teachers in college, and I thought they just don't know. I never met anybody whom I could look up to as capable of teaching me. When my mother, I was 5 years old, and she began teaching me to write, and I think she told me C-A-T, cat. I looked at her very coldly. She described it as cold. I'd say it was impartial or impersonal. And I said, "And how do you know? You're just a mother. You're not a teacher." That was pretty preposterous, and I'm not ashamed of it, because why be ashamed? But I know I was wrong, and I know she was right. But the thing is that when I met my guru, when I read his book, that completely changed. The first words I addressed to him back in 1948, I was only 22. I said, "I want to be your disciple." And I have never, in all these 56 years, changed my mind on that. I had found someone whom I could look up to. Well, most Americans could not. They would sort of rebel. And then they were too much hooked, as my guru said last time, on physical pleasures and so on. But even without those, there's too much ego there. So the women who go more by heart, they could feel more in terms of devotion who he was. But he used to feel that he wanted, I know one time, I think I've mentioned this before. In fact, dear me, I think I may mention it again. I won't do it now because tomorrow I think it's my reading. Anyway, no, it's today. Ha. Okay, I will read it to you because he was saying that he needed masculine energy because the masculine energy is that which goes outward. Some women act that way. They're good business people and so on, but it's really the masculine energy. Women have to work at it, and men don't. It's just their nature. Let me read this to you because it's quite an interesting thing. Again and again, I've read something, told you a story, and then the next day I had to read it, but this time I'm on top of myself. It's saying number 187 from Conversations with Yogananda. The Master expressed his need for masculine power in his work. Only thus he must have felt would his mission generate the power it needed to exert a broad influence on society. At his desert retreat in 1950, he said something to me when we were alone that I have quoted elsewhere, but never so clearly as here. Apart from St. Lin, that's his chief disciple, Rajarshi Janakananda, every man has disappointed me. He paused a moment, as if to impress on me the urgency of his meaning, then added with great emphasis, and you mustn't disappoint me. I knew that his disappointment wasn't over the spiritual zeal of his men disciples, although fewer men came to him than women. I understood, therefore, that his words referred to the men's understanding of the broader needs of his mission. Though many of them were deeply dedicated spiritually, more than zeal for their own attainment was needed if the work was to expand and change the world. No man, apparently, had ever grasped the vital importance of his mission to the world. Masculine energy was needed for it to be spread and understood in its broadest context. Inwardly I vowed that day never to disappoint him. To the best of my ability, I have remained faithful to my vow. I've always been the kind of man who tries to think, how can others know this? How can I improve on it? How can we get this out? When I came to him, it was partly with the thought that I want God and I want to be his disciple and find God through my discipleship to him. The other part of me was thinking, this is such a great mission. I would like the whole world to know about it. What can I do to make that happen? Well, he saw these two sides in me. One of them wanted to be a hermit, but the other side could never have rested until his mission was known, because I saw that it was very important. In America, most certainly, they're running after the almighty dollar, which of course is not almighty at all. There is a true story about a group of very famous and very wealthy men who met at I don't remember what the occasion was, but it was heads of different companies. And they were very famous and very powerful. A few years later, somebody looked at all their lives. Each one of them had lost his wealth, lost his position, was not poor, but was by no means what he was before. The almighty dollar is not almighty because the almighty dollar can crash, because you can lose the almighty dollar and it goes off, as Master used to say, that money is a prostitute. It just goes from hand to hand, changing hands. It doesn't mean anything to the money. And the people who cling to it too hardly, too strongly, too fervently, they can't but lose it in time if they think only me, me, me. The nature of this world is up and down. You're bound to lose. If not in this life, then in other lives. It may take several lives to overcome that karma and become poor again. But you do overcome it in the sense of coming out of it. And sooner or later you will. You will have to experience both. It's just the nature of things. Some people say, well, what happens in the future? There's a story. Actually, it's not in the book, but it's in the movie of Jane Austen's novel, Pride and Prejudice. In some ways, this is an exception. The movie is better than the novel. It was written by Aldous Huxley. But anyway, this young girl runs away, elopes with somebody, and then finally comes back, and the man wasn't going to marry her, but in time he did, owing to various circumstances I won't repeat here. But the interesting thing was that her older and much more sensible sister, this young girl, was saying, just look at my room, why don't you, my ring, why don't you congratulate me? And the sister said, I would like to just see how you are 5 years from now. Oh, who cares, 5 years? As if that were eternity. Well, 5 years aren't that long, and when it comes, it's today. And when in future lives it comes, it's still today for you. How many people are weeping? Why did this happen to me? Why did I have to go through this? Why am I suffering like this? You did it. And the thing is, God is not vengeful. You did it to yourself. You put out that kind of energy. It's like the law of Newton. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That's the law of karma on a physical plane. God didn't wish harm upon you, but he did create that law so that you would learn. If a child touches a hot stove, it pulls back. And then it knows that it shouldn't touch a hot stove again. Now, if it didn't feel pain, then it could lose that hand. Pain is given you as a protection, a warning. Don't do it this way. And it takes people a long time, because my guru explained the law of karma like this. He said that they're thwarting cross currents of ego, so that although if there were no ego, you would suffer the effects immediately, the ego takes you off in this way, in this direction. It takes a long time for all the waves to settle down to the point where that particular wave has its own trough. But sooner or later, it will be now. And many of those sooner or laters from past lives are now today for you. And so nothing in this life is very long-lasting. Nothing really works. You think, oh, I'll find everything I want in married bliss. Well, the bliss is there on the wedding day, perhaps. And then, what then? If nothing else, it's become such a compromise. It becomes so ordinary compared to the dreams that you had of perfect love. There's a beautiful movie. It's called An Affair to Remember, with Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr. And what makes it beautiful is that it helps one to understand how surely the longing for love is in every heart. And yes, it's fulfilled in an outward way after many trials and so on. But that longing will never be fulfilled finally. You think that that moment when everything seems to come right, that will be eternal. It's not. Probably in that case, there weren't what my guru used to say, that he said that they live happily ever after, and that's when the director wisely cuts the film so that you don't see the morning after. Well, in some cases, and I expect that in this case, the story would not normally have ended with what my guru used to describe laughingly as rolling pins and black eyes. Nonetheless, there is at least the disappointment of realizing that it's a compromise. Real love cannot be personal or physical or even mental. It can only be in the soul. Real love is that which breaks all boundaries and merges outward. Real love is not and cannot be confined to one person. This is why one evening when I and several of the other monks were with our Guru, and I was feeling so much love for him. I remember a hostess in the house where we were staying was you're a real student of yoga, and I said, of Yogananda, you mean? That was my feeling that evening. Because I had that feeling, my Guru told me to go meditate. He didn't accept personal love from people. He wanted us to understand that that love was ultimately for the infinite self. One disciple of his used to be like a daughter to him, because in a past life she had been a daughter. And then he began to try to break that attachment, which was good in the beginning because it helped to develop devotion, but he didn't want it to be focused on him. So he used to treat her quite harshly every time he spoke to her, just to break that. It was never with personal feeling, but one evening she went out and prayed, Divine Mother, from now on I will love only you and will see only you in him. And when she came in, she saw him and knelt for his blessing, and he sort of shook her hair a little bit and said, very good. That's what he wanted of all of us. That impersonal love is the only love that exists. I remember telling Anandamayi Ma one time how all of my Guru Bhais and I had great love for her. And she was very impersonal by much more expressing impersonality, I think. And she said, there is no love but God's love. And that is the truth. When you feel love for other people, don't think that that is what love is really all about. It cannot be limited. It is infinite. So that masculine side is a very important side. Women should develop it too. And men should not think that devotional sweetness is the whole thing. God wants strength. He wants you to be tough in yourself, not to feel pain and so on, want to reach out to everybody. This is what my Guru was, and he was pleased to see that in me. But that truth, don't think that it can be confined. In this next song, truth can never die. Truth is not a fact. Truth is a state of consciousness. And some people think they will find it in one way or another. No, it's in the infinite. And that truth cannot die. Joy to you.
Some men call it progress, down with those who doubt. To join the causes others join and shout when others shout. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Some men lack the daring ever to be free. They shun the heights and cloud the depths and court security. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Cowards see but pride in singularity. Oh, never mind if men are wrong, so long as they agree. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. the power within you, error to defy. The world may change or disappear, but truth can never die. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone.